Hey, Bobby, welcome to Virginia Legends podcast. I got Dr. Robert Stokes with me today, a Virginia point guard legend from the 70s, a guy I played rec ball with many years ago. And other than Facebook, I don't think I've seen you since then. But welcome aboard and thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been quite a long time.
Yeah, you haven't aged a bit. I feel like people out there
You need some glasses.
yeah. So Bobby, have you been following the basketball team this year? It was a pretty disappointing end, but I guess the good news is we have a new coach on the women's side, Coach Mox. Do you still
I've been watching them this year. It's been a tough year, but with the transfers that's left, and then you got transfers coming in, it takes a while for the people to really gel with Coach Bennett's system. Yeah. And I thought it was going to be pretty rocky this year, but we held our own for the most part. We had a couple of disappointing games, but we were respectable.
So yeah, it's funny. Expectations have gotten high because like when you were playing, you were one of the first. You were the first generation of UVA teams I expected to win. You guys were beginning to win, and I guess now that Coach finally got us a title, I guess they want that every year.
Yep, and you forget it. He almost won 20 games this year. It's not like he only won, 2 or 4 or 6, 10 games. He won almost 20 games and did well to beat Duke at Duke. I mean, that's just unheard of with this kind of team.
I was surprised going into the ACC tournament that I read somewhere that unless we won the tournament, we only had like a 5% chance of getting in. And I was thinking we beat Duke and we had a pretty good year, but I guess the strength of schedule wasn't so hard. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I would have thought if we had won the tournament, we were going to get in. It's just hard to think that if you don't win the ACC tournament, you will not get into the NCAA no matter what. So I heard that, but I figured if we won, we'd get in.
Right. Yeah, that's back in the old days, back when you played, you had to win to get in. So,
that's true. That's true.
Well, Bobby, I talked to Ricky 3 or 4 months ago, and he grew up in Richmond because I guess your parents had moved to Richmond after you graduated. So you're from actually King William County, Virginia, which is about 35, 40 miles northeast of Virginia.
Yes.
So I guess you grew up there. Your father was a principal at a school in King William.
Yes, my dad was the principal of the what turned out to be the elementary school. But when we first moved down there, it wasn't integrated county. And actually he was principal of the black school. And then we had King William as the all white school. And we also had an Indian school in that county too. So we had three school systems in that one school, in that one county. And ironically, they were on the same highway. But yeah, he was a principal at Hamilton Homes when we went in King William.
So growing up, was that rare to have a black principal at a school with white students?
Yes. I mean, like I said, I guess my 7th grade year was the year that we integrated. And so that's all I knew growing up. I mean, from kindergarten or 1st grade to 7th grade, my dad was the principal, period. And of the black school, it was, 1 through 12 grades. So that's all we knew. Wow. And then in the 7th grade, which, you look back at it, it wasn't that far back down the road, 1970, we integrated and he became the principal of the elementary school. And then the other school was ended up being the high school, grades 8 through 12. So, but then after I went to high school, he left and went to the State Department of Education. So, but I finished out in King William.
You guys integrated late, and most of the schools were 67, 68. You guys were a couple years behind.
Yes, we were.
Wow. So do you remember the tension of going to school?
Actually, it was more tension in the upper class grades than it was in the lower group. We were, 6th and 7th grade. I was a 7th grader back then. And my dad was a pretty strict principal. So you didn't do a whole lot back then. You told the line no matter how you felt, but we actually did well together. And as we matriculated up into the high school, it just all gelled. The county kind of came together, and I think sports had a lot to do with it because we only had basketball, baseball, and football and track, and same kids do the same thing. And so and that was the only show in town. So people kind of migrated and we integrated and blossomed from there.
And most of the white students stayed in the public school. They didn't go to a private school.
Nope. Everybody pretty much stayed in the public schools. And the Indian population also came to the high school. So we all three races integrated at one time.
God, that must have been fascinating.
Mhm.
So when did you learn how to play basketball?
Well, I was pretty blessed. I was pretty lucky. My dad was a principal or teacher forever, ever since I was growing up. So I was always around school, in a school system, always around basketball, because gym was already available. I can look back and probably say I really got interested in basketball. Well, my mom and dad both played basketball. I mean, so you're always thinking about, they always talked about basketball. But when we were in Fincastle outside of Roanoke, he was a principal out there. And I was about kindergarten, first grade. And I can just remember watching the high school guys, because they practiced after school. And I would just sit there and watch them. And then I would play in the gym, and they would play with me because I was a principal's son. And I just got fascinated with basketball back then, and it just blossomed. I can just remember, I guess I was being that age, 6, 7. Fincastle had these shiny, bright green uniforms, and when they came out of the locker room, it was just sparkling, and people were yelling and screaming, and I just got fascinated with that at that point. So I always had a gym to play in. So after school, before school, I'd go and play basketball.
And you're playing with yourself? Are you playing 21 with small groups? Or are you guys playing
pretty much, in the beginning, I played by myself. But as I got a little older, after the big guys would graduate, would practice. After practice, they would play with me a little bit. But we didn't really actually have organized basketball. I think my first team was my 6th grade. We had an organized basketball team. But before then, it was just playing. Kids get together, play. We used to play everywhere. We used to put hoops up on the outside because we had no asphalt courts. It was all dirt courts, or you could occasionally go into the gym. My dad would let us in, or the janitor would let us in. But for the most part, it was just playing anywhere you could.
And by then you were at King William, right? This is King
Yes.
William. Okay. So when you look back, when you look at Ricky's development and your development, he benefited from playing with you a lot. All the younger brothers are generally get the benefit of playing with the older brother and their friends and being exposed to it. But do you think it was a big difference in your development because he ended up going to Richmond and playing high school there, against the city kids? Or you think it probably didn't make much difference one way or the other?
I think he probably had a little bit more of an advantage because he was in the city schools, and he got a whole lot more talent. They were AA, AAA schools. They played all the time. They had the gyms and the courts, and we had limited resources. Basically, you had the kids that were in the county. Occasionally, when I was old enough to drive, we would get a group of guys and go over to the next county and play the school over in the next county. So, but pretty much you basically played with only a few group of people. So I think his exposure was a whole lot different from mine, but we played all the time. Bottom line is you just had to play.
Was next county Caroline? Was that Caroline County you're talking about?
It was, King and Queen, Caroline County, West Point was the other end of the county. Matthews and Middlesex, all those were counties. So, and occasionally we would come up to Hopewell to play because we would go to camps during the summer, and occasionally met some kids up in Hopewell, and we'd travel up there on a Saturday and play all day. But for the most part, it was just basically us getting together in the county, the guys, the same guys that played football, played basketball. So it was a group of athletes that we just kind of played together.
Who are your role models? Like nowadays, kids are on YouTube. There's basketball on TV all the time. When you were young, and when I was young, you may have an NBA game on TV once a week. You may have the ACC game on the week. You probably didn't even have that yet when you were watching it. But who did you see play and wanted to play like?
I think my guy that I really was Walt Frazier. I would have to say it was Walt Frazier from the New York Knicks. He was a guard. He played defense. He scored. and I love those sideburns. So he just had a swagger to him that just, he could handle the ball, he could guard, he could shoot, he could do a little bit of everything. And that was a guy who I kind of always watched if I was going to watch somebody.
Yeah, he was great. And he could dress too.
He could dress.
Yeah, I read his autobiography when I was a kid. And one thing he said in his autobiography, it was a very thoughtful book. He said that when he was playing defense, whenever the ball would leave the hand of the ball handler, you have a second and a half before it bounces back. And that's the time to go. And as you remember, I was a real small guy. So I learned that from him. When the ball handler would leave that ball, I would go in there and get it. And, a lot of times I got in foul trouble doing that. But a lot of times, you can make a big play. And I learned that from Walt Frazier.
Yep. And also he used to say, in order to steal the ball, you always bat it down he reaches with the hand that's on the outside, not the one on the inside. Yeah. And so that's the way I learned how to do that too.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, so when did you know you were going to be something special in basketball? I mean, you're in the country, you're probably relatively isolated, but you're starting to play pickup games with the kids from the next county. So when did you know that you might be able to do this?
I guess probably when I was probably third or fourth grade.
Oh, wow, that's young. Yeah.
Yeah, because my dad was a principal, like I said before, and the teams used to play high school, JV and varsity used to play practice after school, and I would kind of be in there and look around, and sometimes I would be in there just kind of shooting around. So I learned to shoot and learned to play with them. They would play with me a little bit after practice. So I kind of had some skill way back probably there. And then I think probably fifth grade, we started having a little bit more organized stuff with gym and phys ed. And then sixth grade year, I had a guy named Mr. Faison, my coach, PE teacher, put together a basketball team. And we traveled to other schools and played. We had our little team, and we actually played the JV team, and it just took off from there.
Wow.
So,
well, you had an unbelievable high school career. You may still be the leading scorer of all time. I don't know. I know a few years ago, you averaged basically 30 points for your last 3 years. I think you averaged 34 your senior year, which is unbelievable. Who was your high school coach?
My high school coach was a man named Fred Valentine. And he was a coach of King William High School.
He's a white guy? He was a white guy.
No, it's Valentine. He was a black guy, which, when we integrated, he came at the integration. So he got the head coaching job. So I played JV for my 8th and 9th grade year. He wanted me to come up to the varsity on the 9th grade year, but I elected to stay on the JV team my 9th grade year, and then I moved up in the 10th grade and played varsity at 10th grade. I scored quite a bit during the high school. It was only 3 years that I played varsity basketball, and one of those years was cut short, believe it or not, because of gas shortage. So a whole season was cut short. We only had about 12 to 14 games out of the whole season because we travel so much, and the gas prices and school system, they all cut back. So we only had a 12 or 14 game season. Yeah. That 1 year.
Oh, what did you learn from your coach? What was his style? And was it a big deal when he got the job at the?
It was a big deal when he got the job, because we didn't think there's a lot of things. I mean, actually, he taught me a whole lot. He actually changed my jump shot between my 9th and my 10th grade year, because I was so small and a little scrawny. I used to have kind of like a push jump shot. I did it from the belly down, and he kept saying, you're a little guy, you're gonna have to get that ball above your head so the big guys won't swat it. Well, in a way that was great, but I shot the ball so far out that a lot of times the big guys didn't come out that far anyway. But he changed the way I shot, and I was in the gym practicing. I think he just instilled on me that no matter what size you are, that you can accomplish anything. He was almost like my second dad, and I still call him my second dad. He showed me how to do defense. helped me with my dribble. But the main thing he did was, help me with my shot. And also just make it seem like it was a family. He didn't care whether you were the last guy on the bench or the first guy on the bench, or the guy who started. Everybody had a role. And another thing I think he instilled in me is that everybody is important. I don't care if it's a scorekeeper, the person who does the mops the floor, everybody is important, and it takes a village to win. And you got to treat people with respect. But he also taught me that when you're on that floor, you take no prisoners. You try to do everything you can to win within reason.
It's just fascinating. And maybe this is a lesson for what makes great players, is that Ricky described Coach Lancaster almost the exact same way you just described your coach. I forgot your coach's name again.
Fred Valentine.
Yeah, it sounds just like the same things that Ricky had said about your brother Ricky had said about Coach Lancaster, who was a Highland Springs coach.
Yeah. He, and I still to this day, I text him, I call him, I talk to him.
Really?
Yeah. And we, so like I said, he was my second dad. Wow. Somebody you could go to with any kind of problem. He was ahead of the game and just kind of kept up with me as I go through life. It wasn't just like you played basketball in King William, you played at UVA. He's been with me and in my corner all through life, through everything, and he still is. And
it sounds like you guys played a lot of up tempo, because you and I know you had a backcourt partner. You guys scored a lot of points.
Yeah, we did. We did he believed back then we did a UCLA 2-2-1 press. We pressed all over the court, and we were fast enough to go, and so everything was predicated around there. And also, when you got the rebound, you just flew, and you just didn't give anybody any time to break. I think we did have one game that he just kept shaking his head. It didn't go into overtime. We played a school called Pocosin.
Yeah.
And we had everybody coming back, and they had everybody coming back, but they picked them preseason number 1 and all that kind of stuff. And we weren't even supposed to be, we were ranked down below them. And we went to their place, and we had a little chip on our shoulders. And we won the game 118-104. And it didn't go in overtime. It only went 4 quarters. So we just scored and scored. We didn't play the defense, but we scored. Yeah. So we had fun though. It was fun.
Yeah, well, I went to the state programs about that time because I wanted to see with all the points Palmer was his last. What was your part? Oh, Butler. What was his first name?
William
Butler.
Mm-hmm.
All the points you scored. I'm like, well, they got to the state tournaments. I had the state tournaments for that year, and it seems like the teams that you guys couldn't get through were West Point and Washington Lee. Do you remember playing against those guys?
Yeah, we couldn't get to West Point. Had Duke Thorpe, who went to Virginia Tech. And he was about 6'5", and they actually won the state championship. That was the one that was our biggest rival. Mm-hmm. Washington Lee was in another district. We met them in the regional in my senior year, and we should have beat them, but somehow I think I got in a little foul trouble early in the game somehow, and I had to sit out for quite a bit of time. And we did come back, but it was just one of those things that just didn't happen. So.
Yeah, I used to work the single A games on the other side of town, like Cumberland and Farmville, Prince Edward.
Yeah. So you were there with Buckingham with there was a big guy down in Buckingham too. I can't remember.
I can't think of his name, but this is when I was officiating though. And it was always a packed house. All the days. Did you guys play in front of packed houses?
Oh, that was the biggest ticket in town. It was always crowded. You never had a seat in the arena. The gym was packed from stem to stern. People outside. When we traveled, half the county went with us. So, I mean, we had the biggest following forever. I mean, it was almost like it was at UVA, and Ralphton was here. People would come in half an hour, 45 minutes before the game just to get in. Yeah, that's great. And everybody just enjoyed it.
Yeah. So. Well, you got yourself on the radar of all these colleges because you scored so many points. And so they're going to, even though you were, a tiny King William, they're going to come find you. And it looked like you were going to either go to Old Dominion or even locally to Randolph-Macon, which is in Ashland, but you ended up at UVA. How did that happen?
Just by accident, actually. I had actually committed to go to Randolph-Macon. Oh, okay. I was semi-recruited by quite a many other places. I actually went to visited at VCU and Coach Knox, I think that Coach No at that time said he wanted me to come there, but he wanted me to try out. And if I made the team, he'd give me a scholarship. And so, but I had already decided I was going to go to Randolph-Macon because they had Paul Webb there. And I had gone to Coach Webb's camp forever and ever and ever. And I decided I was going to go there. And I called him and told him that I was going to sign the papers that next weekend. And during the week, I got the call from Coach Holland, his staff. They wanted me to come up and take a look at UVA. They were not even on my radar. I didn't even know if I was on their radar, but I think my high school coach kind of pushed him. I mean, he had met I guess it was the graduate assistant who had come out and watched me play and all that kind of stuff. And they had a rapport. And so he just kept pushing. And so finally they decided to bring me up. And so I called Coach Webb and said, I'm going to UVA up here to take a look, but I'll be back, on Friday and I'll sign the papers. He said, no, you got to go take a look. So up on my dad drove me up to Charlottesville and I was up at UVA for the weekend. And then on the last day I was there, Coach Holland offered me a scholarship. He had never seen me play, but I guess the graduate assistant and just my coach being persistent, and I think the fact that the guy who was in there with me, he brought two people in, and he was the Mr. Basketball, Mr. Ohio. I think he was basketball, Mr. Ohio. They brought us both in the same weekend, and they had one scholarship left. And then somehow Coach Holland offered me the scholarship. Now, whether this guy couldn't get into school or something happened, but on that weekend, he offered me a full ride. And I had already committed to Randolph-Macon. And so my dad said, give me a little bit to think about it. So we walked out of the office and into the car. And I told my dad, I'm going to go Randolph-Macon. I don't want to go to UVA. I said, and he looked at me and goes, you're going to go to UVA? And then I said, no, I've given my word. And then we were back and forth to the point where he said, okay, you're just going to go to UVA. So I marched back into Coach Holland's office and I said, I'm coming to UVA. Wow. And then I had the dreaded decision of calling Coach Webb and telling them that I was going to go to UVA. Well, before I got home, it was on the 6 o'clock news that I had signed with UVA. So Coach Webb called me at that time. Wow. But he understood. He said, I wouldn't have, you did the right thing. And it worked out because he actually left Randolph-Macon and went to ODU. And he said, well, I was going to tell you that I was going to go to ODU and I wanted you to come with me to ODU. So it all worked out. So it all worked out. And then a bunch of years later, Coach No, who was at VCU, he all pulled me aside all the time. And he used to say, that was the biggest mistake I've ever made, was not giving you a scholarship. So, wow. So I kind of had a little, but I ended up at UVA just, another week later, I wouldn't even have been at UVA.
Wow. Did Charlottesville seem like a big town to you at the time?
Yes. I mean, we had more people in my dorm than we had in my whole high school. Wow. I mean, we had 500 kids in grades 8 through 12 in one high school. So when I came to UVA, we had more people in the dorm, and the gym itself. That was the first time I realized that I needed contacts because I couldn't see. I wore glasses a little bit in high school, but not much. But when I got in the stadium, the gym, and started practicing, and I was squinting, and they go, "Do you think you can?" So they sent me to get some, and so I had to have contacts. But yeah, it was different. It was different back then. It was. Wasn't many minorities at UVA at that time. Actually, I never met Al Drummond. He was the first Black basketball player at UVA. He graduated before I got there, and he never came back, and I never, ever saw him. I tried to reach out to him before, through the years, just to say thank you or just to say something. and I never could reach him, even with the internet and everything. I still could never. And then I found out that he had passed. He had passed a couple of years ago. I saw an article, but he never came back. And so when I got to UVA, they had Tommy Briscoe, who was from New Jersey. It was his second year, my first year, and then it was me. And I was the first Black player from the state of Virginia on the basketball team. And we had one other guy who transferred in from Chicago. He was a junior college transfer. So my first year, we only had 3 Blacks on the team. Well, we had 4, but my roommate left after 2 months. He couldn't decided this is not the right place for him. Wow. And so he left. So it was only 3 of us in my first year.
Well, when you think about UVA in Charlottesville back then, this is 1975, fall 75. The Vietnam War is over. It's post Watergate. Women have just, I guess the first graduating class probably
70.
It had been 1970. So it was just because women had just started going to university. You're going to go through a time when affirmative action is going to allow universities like UVA to have a lot of Black students. You're going to see part of that. I mean, you're going to have disco was going to come into being like 1977. So it was probably a very interesting time to be in college.
It was an interesting time to be in college. I mean, some of the social stuff we had here at the university. I mean, we had marches on grounds. The president, Herford, at that time belonged to, I guess because he was the president of the university, belonged to the Farmington Country Club. And so I can remember marching on Carr's Hill to kind of say that's wrong because we can't even get into Farmington, let alone you shouldn't, that. And then, just having so few of us, being part of the Black bus stop, that just happened. That's where we all congregated. We had a lot of block parties. We had a lot of parties that, get-togethers in people's apartments. And then just the culture of the university was changing a little bit. I think, I can notice some of my kids in my dorm had never seen a Black guy, never been that close to a Black guy, didn't know how I did my hair or how I did my hair. But then again, it was also a time where people start expressing themselves and doing things together. And my dorm came together and accepted me and started, some of my closest friends are from the people that I was in first year with. Not just my Black friends, but just white friends as well. So it was an interesting time. There were lots of, but still there's some places we didn't feel comfortable going. There were a lot of fraternity houses that, you didn't go. But it also here at the university during that time, I gotta say the Black community around Charlottesville embraced us as their own. I mean, I can remember them telling my folks, during the games that, hey, we're family here. We're just as happy for him being here, and we're going to take care of him. If he needs anything, all he needs to do is call. And so it was a lot of different things going on at university and Charlottesville at that time.
That's fascinating because 10 years later, when I was there was some tension between the Blacks in the community and the students in Charlottesville. Sometimes they thought that we were too good for them. I remember some of the parties, they would not allow folks in without UVA ID. That created friction. And I, as we played, I refereed basketball in the area and I played basketball. I had a lot of friends from town. So I was very well integrated into town life. Yeah. But there was tension. It was tension 10 years later. Yeah,
there were some tensions there too. And then, but I think the more that we came into the community, basketball helped. I mean, it broke down a lot of barriers for me, but also going to church and, going to church in town. I think people started thinking that we weren't different from them, in town. And they kind of embraced us a little bit more. And I do say it wasn't that many of us here. So I think it really helped out.
Yeah. Well, what definitely helped out was your first season, which was just a memorable season in UVA basketball history because you guys won the ACC tournament. But the first thing, and I went through your season, and the first thing that caught my eye, it was like you shot 60% from the field. Now, anyone who plays basketball knows that guards don't shoot 60% from the field; they just don't. And obviously, this is before the 3-pointers. The defenses kind of sagged off back then. It wasn't like the basketball is now. So it had to be an adjustment coming from King William, Singalea.
Oh yeah.
How were you able to do so well so quickly?
Well, one is just confidence. I mean, one getting over the shock that, looking at the players that I'm playing against, people like Phil Ford and Skip Brown and, but I also had some confidence in, I can play too. I made it come from a small school, but I can play too. And, unfortunately for me during that particular time, we were very slow. I was the fastest thing on the team, and you can't run if you're the only one that's running. So, and Coach Holland, bless his heart, was a good coach, good, technical guy, but he was a big guy, and his thing was inside first, and then outside, because you didn't need to shoot 20-foot, 30-foot shots when it counts 2 points as opposed to getting in the lane.
Right.
And so, the shots for the guards were a little limited, and especially for a fast guard like me. And if you run an offense, you need to get past people in order to have a shot. You just can't just bring the ball down and shoot over top of somebody. So, but yeah, I picked and choose my shots, and I, like I said, I could shoot the ball. It was just given the opportunity to.
Yeah, and you had some fantastic teammates. I mean, you had Wally Walker, who ended up having an NBA career. You had Billy Langlow. So when you first started playing with these guys, did you know right away these are very special players?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, I knew from the first go around that we kind of got together to play. They were bigger, stronger, fast. They were bigger and stronger. They weren't faster, I can tell you that much, but very much more polished, and could use their bodies and I had to learn. But then again, on the other hand, they had a hard time staying up with me, and I could steal the ball quite easily. And so, but they were by far better than anybody I had played against.
Wow. Well, the ACC tournament, and I didn't remember this, but I watched the ACC tournament special on ESPN. I don't know if you caught any of it, but back then you had to win the ACC tournament to advance to NCAA. There's only 16 teams were going, and I think maybe the year before you got there, because of the Maryland, they call it the Maryland rule. Maryland had lost a game in overtime to NC State, and they thought those were the two best teams in the country. So the next year, they added 2 teams from the ACC. But anyway,
right, and that large team and basically the winner of the tournament and possibly an at-large bid.
Yeah, exactly. So, and another thing that was different is they had the ACC tournament outside of the state of North Carolina for the first time, I believe, at the Cap Center. Do you remember going up to the Cap Center for that tournament?
Oh yeah. It was, I had never been to a tournament like that. It was my first one. I didn't know what to expect. Yeah, we've been to high school tournaments, and when we were in high school, we had a tournament at York High School because that's the way we could get all the kids in the school at the same time. But this was just beyond my dream. Just walking into the Cap Center where you've seen on TV occasionally, and it was just, I was just blown away just by being there. Kind of almost shaking in my boots kind of thing, how can and pinching myself going, how can a kid from King William be in a place like this, playing in one of the biggest tournaments that, you could ever be. I know we had a big task ahead of us, but I did feel like going into the tournament that we had just as good a chance as winning as anybody, actually, because over the last 4 or 5 games, we had really gelled and really played hard and found our little niche. And if we played our game, we could probably beat anybody. So I felt like we had a chance at it. We just had to do it.
Right. Well, then, but you had to do it the hard way because you had to beat. I think you beat Duke, North Carolina, and NC State.
No, we beat NC State, Maryland,
Yeah.
and Carolina.
In Carolina.
Yeah, all three of them were ranked.
Exactly.
Yeah, all three of them were ranked in the top 10 or top 15, and so yeah, and we had to beat them in consecutive nights. So that was the thing, and we also, being the first time the tournament was outside of Greensboro, we actually stayed because in Greensboro everything is hotels are right around the Coliseum. But for some odd reason, the hotel we were, and maybe they didn't think we were going to stay there that long, was about 30 minutes away from the gym. So we had to take a bus out there and bus in. But so we weren't around the gym per se, but just the practice sessions and just the place in general was just amazing.
Yeah. Well, you hit some really big, you got a couple key steals and you hit some really big free throws. That must have been a great feeling for a freshman.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, just playing was a great thrill. I mean, I just, sometimes I look back and see all the talent that was on the floor, and you're talking about Phil Ford, and you're talking about Tommy Lagarde, and you're talking about John Lucas, and just the players. And I'm out
Howard.
there playing, yeah, I'm just out there playing with them, and actually holding on. And yeah, it came down into Maryland. We're playing our little slow defense, and luckily I'm fast enough and had a few skills that I was able to steal the ball a couple of times, and they put me on the free throw line, and just my knees are shaking a little bit, but got up there and just made I think I made 5 out of 6, I think somewhere like that down the stretch, and then the one I missed, I can remember so well, I missed it, and then Lawrence Boston got the rebound, and then I stole the ball because I missed the free throw, and so I stole the ball right back. So I kind of made up for that, but I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and was able to do it. Yeah.
Well, the next week you're in the NCAA tournament and you played DePaul, Ray Meyer's legendary coach. You guys had to be physically exhausted from playing 3 nights in a row against very good teams. Were you exhausted, and were you able to get ready for the DePaul game?
It was funny because we were exhausted, but I don't know. To us, I guess they always called it, Black Sunday or something like that, because all the ACC teams seemed to lose in the NCAA after the ACC tournament. It was just crazy. Yeah. I think the ACC tournament was just so intense, and that was almost like winning the national championship yourself. You really didn't think about the NCAA. You just thought about the ACC tournament, and just to win that tournament was better than landing on the moon, or better than doing the NCAA tournament, because you didn't think that far. And so we won the tournament. We were exhausted. We come back to Charlottesville. We practice. We going through the motions, and Wally gets sick. He gets the flu or something. He got sick, so he didn't practice that well. And so we got out there and we tried, but unfortunately, they had a pretty good team with a lot of good players. But I think part of it was fatigue, and part of it was just the letdown of ACC tournament. That's the pinnacle for us. And then coming back now, and you're going to have to play an NCAA game. Okay. But we didn't go past the first round.
Yeah. Was the environment of playing against DePaul and future NBA player Dave Corzine, did it match the ACC environment?
No, did not match at all. I mean, the tournament was so electrifying. I mean, not only because you had, what was it, 7, 8 teams in the ACC at that time. And so by the time the tournament, the final got there, even though teams had lost, they rooted for a certain team. I mean, granted, because of the fact that we had an at-large bid, sometimes the other team wanted another team to win so their team could go and not us. But by the end of the tournament, it was like half the gym was for Carolina, half the gym was for UVA, and it was just electrifying. And then you go to the NCAA, you're playing at a gym that's not in the ACC. It's not, you're just playing, I don't know where we played at. We might have played it in Charlotte. It just wasn't anything that was anything close to what it was like. Now, maybe if I made it to the Final Four, which is totally different, but those first rounds, you just got your teams and you got some from the other school. It's not anything like the ACC tournament.
Yeah. Well, then your second year, you guys, the team didn't have a great record, I don't believe, but you make another ACC tournament run.
Yeah, well, it was almost like the Bad News Bears the second year. I mean, we come from winning the championship, and of course, everybody, thinking that was a fluke and they had something to prove. But going into the season, I mean, we lost Wally, which was a big loss, but we still had quite a many guys coming back. But we had a series of things that happened. I mean, we had Otis Fulton, who was our center. He gets in the first season, he gets his teeth knocked out and has to have braces in his teeth. We had another forward pass out into the locker room. I mean, pass out in the dorm, fall, break his jaw. So, and then we had just injuries galore. So we never had a really full team. And so, we just kind of kept plugging along. And yes, we had the longest losing streak in the ACC going into the tournament. We lost, we were 0-10 almost going into the tournament. We won our first game down in Clemson, at Clemson. And then we came back and we won another game. And then our last game, we played Carolina at Carolina, and we gave them the Dickens, almost beat them in Carolina. And so when we went into the tournament, we felt good about ourselves again. And so we actually went through and lost to Carolina in the finals that year.
Yeah, well, and you made the all tournament team, so that's got to be one of the highlights of your basketball career. But before we get to the tournament, the final, you played Wake Forest. No, you played Wake Forest in the first game. The reason why I mentioned that was when I started following basketball, this was the first team I liked, and I was like 11 years old, and I love Frank Johnson, and I love Rod Griffith. I mean, I used to love this team, and I remember you knocked them off first game.
Yeah, we knocked him off first game. Rod Griffin was a monster. He was a beast. And luckily we got Frank Johnson when he was young. As he got a little older, he his play just elevated. But yeah, I was second year, so I had a little bit underneath my belt, so I knew a little bit more. So we were able to get by them. Did it close. It was a close game. And then I forgot who we played the second. I think might have been Clemson.
I think you Clemson and then UNC.
Yeah, Clemson with Tree Rollins with the 7'2".
Yeah.
And actually we beat them pretty handily. And I think that was probably my better game of the. Well, I had 3 good games that game. I was pretty consistent with where I was playing. And so going into the finals, I thought that we actually had them up until the Carolina up until the last 5 minutes of the game. Right? And then they kind of, I don't know whether we ran out of gas, we made a few little mistakes, and then it was close the rest of the way, but we only lost by 4 or 5, but we could have won that one too, and which would have been a storybook. But I played well enough there to get named in the first team tournament. And so I laughed because I stepped up from my first year. I was on the second team. I was a freshman, so because I guess the tournament and everything else, and as I have to backtrack a little bit. As I was leaving the tournament at Greensboro, some of the guards and people who were at the side of the court, one of them pulled me aside and he gave me his badge, and he says, "You made my all-star team." so and then the ACC, and then the next year I made the first team, and I actually had a couple of votes for the MVP of that tournament. That's awesome. So it was a good tournament for me. It really was.
Well, you don't make the NCAA tournament because your record was poor that year, so you can't get the at-large bid. But you go to the NIT, I believe, right? And you play.
Yeah.
Or is that the junior year you played Georgetown?
Yeah, the junior year is when we played Georgetown.
Okay,
Yep.
so you get you don't make the tournament.
Yep, we go home and have a spring break.
You go home on spring break, yes, you enjoy yourself. So the next year though, you do well enough where you guys make the NIT. So, but you didn't. So what was the ACC tournament like the next year?
They were all tough. They were, the ACC was still a battle. It was still, because they didn't take, it was still 32 teams. So you either had to win the tournament or you had to win the season.
Right.
And if if the same team won the regular season, they could afford not winning the tournament, but the winner of the tournament went. And if you won both, then they took one of the other teams to go. So it's still only 2 teams that win. Yeah. So that meant that ACC tournament was still a end all for a lot of teams. And so it was still action packed, still very intense. And unfortunately, we bowed out a couple of times pretty early. I think might have the second round in the third year and second round in my fourth year. But yeah, no, they were still intense because only 2 teams made it to the ACC NCAA tournament.
Do you remember the Georgetown game? Now, Georgetown at the time, this is before the Big East, at the time they were independent. I think they eventually went to ECAC, but they were independent. Yep. John Thompson was a relatively local name. He played for the Celtics, and he had a lot of local players. And these are guys, they used to have Georgetown on Channel 5 up here in DC. So they had Bebe Duran and I forgot who, Duran and who else was on that team? But anyway, I knew those guys, and you ended up playing. Do you remember that game when you played?
Just a little bit, not much. But I know we went into overtime, and we lost in overtime.
Wow! And you had no idea John Thompson was going to be anything special, did you?
No. It's just one of the. Like I said, life outside the ACC almost was non-existent. To be totally honest with you, it's just kind of, the world was the ACC, and again back then you played every team twice. You played everybody twice. You played them home and home. So that was your world. I mean, we played William and Mary, and we played, except for playing Virginia Tech, which some years we played them 3 times. We played some other people, William and Mary, and some other people. But for the most part, it was just the ACC. You put on a day when you started the ACC, and then that's the only thing you cared about.
Yeah. Well, then your senior year, you finally get some players of the quality of like Wally Walker, because you got Jeff Lamp and Lee Raker come in. I think they're teammates from Louisville, I believe, and they're great outside shooters. So did you know they were going to be special when they arrived?
Yes. I mean, I knew they were going to be special. Jeff Lamp, we had Jeff Lamp and Lee Raker. Lee we called him Mr. Military. He was aggressive. He was hard-nosed, a tough player. Jeff could shoot the ball with the best of them. And so, you knew from the start that they were special players. They needed to grow, though. I mean, I can remember when Jeff came and, we played pickup games. Coach Holland would say, we play pickup games, and he would tell me, take it easy on Jeff. He can't dribble the ball. He don't take it from him too much. Don't ruin his confidence, kind of thing. But in our system, we ran an offense that just made his game elevate that much better. Pretty much like Wally. Our offense ran through Wally. As I got 4th year with Jeff and Lee, a lot of the offense went through Jeff, and a lot of plays designed for him, and he could make it. He could make the shot. Yeah.
Well, there are also 2 players I wanted to ask you about because they're Northern Virginia legends, Billy Langlow and Dave Kesters. Because Kesters played for the West Springfield team that played against Petersburg in the state final, and Moses Malone. This game is legendary where I'm from. People talk about it all the time.
Yep.
And Langlow came here and coached after he graduated. So what were those 2 guys like?
Totally different players, but both intense. I mean, Billy was so laid back, but very smooth, very sneaky, smooth player. I guess he could have been like a New York City player. I mean, he had some moves and some things to put the ball in different places, and could move and guard people. But Dave, on the other hand, Dave was a little slow, but Dave could shoot the ball very, very well. Unfortunately, in our offense, he didn't shine as much as he did when he was at Springfield. We didn't have that kind of offense, and so, but they both, and they, to their credit, I mean, even though we were guards, they embraced me and they helped me. They, Billy would come and tell me, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. Don't worry about this player. And I can remember one game, we were playing Virginia Tech, and I think it was we had played them 2 other times, and we were down in Roanoke and we were playing them down there, and it was just one of those games that was just brutal. People were being knocked down. Referees were just letting them play. And I guess I got a little ticky-tack foul. I reached, the guy I was guarding, did something, and I reached and knocked the ball loose, and they called me a foul. And Billy walked up to me, he goes, and I guess I jumped up when the guy called the foul. And before I hit the ground, he called a technical on me. And then Billy says, I can't, and Billy walked over to me and he goes, now watch this. And he walked over to the referee and he berated that referee. He took a technical for me. So from that point on, we were best of friends. So
that's great.
And then when I went to the line in the ACC tournament, Billy would, you got this, no problem. Just go right in the basket. So, yes, he was kind of like a mentor too. He was an older guy, of course, took me on his wing. He kind of helped me and kind of guided me and helped develop me along the way too.
Yeah. Well, Ricky comes to UVA after you leave, and he has a totally different experience because he plays with Ralph Sampson. So he is Goliath. He plays on a team that's rated 1 and 2 many times during his career. His last year, they weren't as tough because Ralph had graduated and they ended up going to the Final Four. On the other hand, your career, you were usually the underdog. You were on a team, UVA was still building, and you had some huge upsets. When you look back on it, which experience do you think you would have preferred? Did you prefer the way it was with you, or would you prefer to play the way Ricky was when they were always the favorite?
I think everybody wants to play with Ralph, period.
Is that right? Yeah.
But no, I think, I don't know. I kind of like the way we played. I like kind of being the underdog role. You got nothing to lose. You got everything to gain. Yeah. Now, I don't want to be 2-10, but I'd like to be. But then again, we had to play as we didn't have the best of players, so we always didn't have to rely on one person. You had to, like Ricky's team in his 4th year. They lost Ralph. So they didn't have a bunch of superstars, but they all had to play well together in order to win. And that's a lot of the times after we lost Wally and before Jeff and Lee came, we had to, we developed and we had to play together and we played hard. And one thing I had to say is if you came to UVA and played us, you knew you were in for a fight. It was never an easy game. Now we might not have won a lot, but it was definitely one of those games where you knew that we were going to give you everything we had and it wasn't going to be easy. But would I have loved to play with Ralph? Yes, because I think we would have ran a whole lot more. When I played, we didn't run. Sometimes they said we were slower than the Merlin, Terrapins, the Turtles. We should have been called the Virginia Turtles instead of them. So with Ralph, they ran, they did a lot. I think I kind of probably would have averaged a little bit more points if I had to play with Ralph now.
I actually think you would have worked well with Othell as well, because you could have had someone else to run with you. You guys could have created a lot of havoc, just like Ricky.
Yeah,
Ricky
I wasn't as fast as Ricky though, but I was okay. So
yeah. One thing when I talked to UVA players, and I also heard this from JJ Redick on the ACC special, is how tough it was to play at Maryland. That the fans were terrible. Barry Parkhill said this. Bob McKay, my high school coach, said it. Did you find the Maryland fans that bad?
I didn't. Maryland fans were okay. I think for me, the worst fans were Duke.
Yeah.
I mean, they ridiculed you and Maryland was an old field house. Cole Fieldhouse was old. The players, the fans were right there, but Duke was right there behind them. I mean, you had your bench where you were sitting and you had one row behind. They were like a high school. You sit on a high school bleachers and you had one row behind you with your little bit of fans, and they didn't give you many tickets. And then their fans are right there. Sometimes we would try to, have a little time out, and their fans would be looking over in our, looking across our shoulders into our little thing. So that's why they moved moved out a little bit. But Cole Fieldhouse was packed, and they really were rowdy. I'd say both of them were up there. Either Duke or Maryland had to be probably up there.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say is, if you think about what kind of player you would have been today, I think today's game would have really favored you with your range and the 3-point stripe. I think you probably could have been a big scorer today in today's game.
I think so. I think, yeah, because we in high school, we just shot outside. I mean, we shot. I mean, we did a lot of shooting, and I think, most of my shots were not easy in the lane shots. They were outside the 3-point shot. So I kind of think I would have been fairly decent. It would have been a bigger threat.
Yeah. Well, look, last question. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your medical career?
Mhm.
I know when I met you, I think you were doing your internship out in Buckingham or out in the counties somewhere.
Mhm.
And you've had this great career, and you have a couple daughters. I think one of them at least went to UVA, I believe, right?
Well, I have 3 daughters, and all three of them went to UVA.
Yes. Why don't you tell us what you've been up to the last 40 years?
Well, I went to med school. I was blessed enough to get into med school. Went to UVA med school, and then I did residency in family practice down in Newport News. And then I came back and did I paid the government back in public. I went to med school on a public health scholarship. And I came back and worked for them out in Buckingham, where you were talking about, to pay, basically to pay my scholarship back. And then I worked there for 3 years, which, was great. And then I went and worked in the emergency room outside of Richmond for about 14 years. And then about 2004, I decided it's time for me to get out. And I came back and into family practice here in Charlottesville. So the Dr. May, who was our team physician, always wanted me to come back and join him or be part of his practice when at some point. And so he kept after me every time I'd see him at a football game or a basketball game. It's time to come back. And so finally I decided, it was time for me to get back into family practice. So I came back in 2004. And I worked for him and Dr. Dandridge, local doctors in town. In about 2014, I decided it was time. Well, I was blessed enough to open up my own little practice here by myself. So I'm a solo practitioner, one of the dying breeds, but I'm a single solo practitioner, family practice here in town, and just enjoying life. I have 3 girls, and all 3 of them graduate from UVA. And
awesome.
And so, so everything is just, I'm blessed. I've been blessed, and it's nice to see. I still see a lot of the old people that were here when I was here. Still remember some of the times I was here, and have fond memories. And so it's like coming home. It's almost, Charlottesville feels a lot like King William, where I grew up in. And so I was just blessed to be here. So right now I'm just doing family practice, enjoying life. I have my own little practice. It's just me, and I don't have any other partners. And so it's a blessing come true.
Well, my son's coming down. He'll be a freshman at UVA in the fall. So I'll make sure if something happens to him, if for some reason the UVA can't admit him, he'll come see Dr. Stokes.
That's fine. I have a lot of people who do that. A lot of, I'm on speed dial for a lot of the parents' children these days. So it actually is pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, isn't it also awesome the way you and Ricky and all the UVA athletes are treated in Charlottesville? There's a certain I was going to say enigma that you guys are held on a higher level because you played in those golden years. I mean, I remember when I met you, and I knew Ricky. I was a couple years behind Ricky, but the way they thought of their athletes at UVA, it was just great. Do you enjoy that in Charlottesville? People say, yeah, that was Bobby Stokes. He played in the 70s.
Yes, I mean, I enjoy it very much. But it's a blessing that I was able to play basketball. And it just goes to show that I think doing back that time, it was more of a community team also.
Yeah.
I mean, it just wasn't, I mean, now it's not that it's not a community team now, but I just think that back then, fans were more vested, more into it. And we were more accessible. Nowadays, you can't touch you can't go out to dinner with somebody, or you can't do this. Everything's against the rule. Back then, we went into town, we ate at people's homes. Christmas time, they would invite us over to the house. We went to church, and so I think we were part of the university and part of the community too. And I just think, and I think, going from, not winning anything to building the program, I think they built it, they went with us. It was their journey too. And so I think they respected what we were going through, and they were part of it. So, and it was a golden era. It was a golden time for Charlottesville.
Well, mystique was the word I was looking for, and you just described it perfectly. So, well, look, Bobby, this has been great reconnecting with you. Again, I'll be going down and visiting myself, so maybe we can reconnect in person one of these days. And
that's true. And then we can probably go to Ralph's Tap House now. He has a place down in town. So, and it's really nice. So, but yeah, and I hope your son does well. And if he needs me, all he has to do is call. I'm in the phone book, or you got my number now.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. I'm sure we'll be taking you up on it as well.
Sounds great.
Okay, Bob. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you, Mike. Bye.
Bye.